time the bells finally stopped, the graves were already waiting. But this story did not begin here.
You think the plague began with the dead, but it began with the living, with trade, with roads, with ships crossing distant seas. The world was more connected than anyone understood.
This gold is for the silk.
And with that connection, something deadly was already moving.
The sickness did not begin in Europe. It came from far beyond its borders. To understand where it began, we must look to the east, far beyond the cities of Europe, far beyond the Mediterranean, far into the vast lands of Central Asia.
But the ship, on its journey to Europe, did not carry only cargo. It carried something else, something hidden among the merchandise, something small, silent, invisible, rats, and with them, a bacterium no one could see, Yersinia pestis. For centuries, this bacterium lived in balance with wild animals, mostly among rodents in the vast lands of Central Asia. In those distant regions, the disease rarely reached humans. It remained hidden, quiet, contained, but that balance could break. Changes in climate, movement of people, new trade routes, closer contact between animals and humans. And once the balance was lost, the sickness began to spread.
Modern studies have revealed where the first signs appeared, not in Europe, not in the great cities of the West, but far to the east, in the vast lands of Central Asia, near the mountains and dry valleys of a distant region. There, near the shores of a lake called Issyk-Kul, ancient remains revealed one of the earliest signs of the disease. Silent evidence left behind, proof that the plague had already begun. And from this place, it started to spread.
But the ship, on its journey toward Europe, was not carrying only cargo. It was carrying something else, something hidden among the goods, something small, silent, invisible, rats, and with them, a bacterium no one could see, the one we now call Yersinia pestis.
In the year 1346, many cities of Europe were living in prosperity. Venice, Florence, Genoa, great centers of trade and wealth. Markets were full, ships arrived every day. Merchants, travelers, and workers filled the streets. Life seemed strong, stable, unstoppable. Among them was a traveler named Elias. He had seen many lands, but nothing yet had prepared him for what was coming.
But like every great city, this one had its problems. Narrow streets, crowded houses, people living too close to one another. It was the kind of place where something dangerous could spread fast, and no one knew.
By the time the ships approached Europe, something was already very wrong. Some vessels arrived with sick men on board, others arrived with crews barely alive, and some arrived in silence, no voices, no commands, no movement on deck, only bodies.
That it had already arrived.
The plague had already crossed the sea before anyone even knew it existed.
There was no one left alive to tell what had happened. At first, people believed these were isolated tragedies, accidents at sea, another lost crew, another voyage without luck. No one imagined that something invisible had traveled with them. But when the disease finally reached the crowded streets of the cities, it found the perfect conditions. Narrow streets, dirty water, animals in the streets, people living side by side, places where the disease could move faster than anyone could stop it. And from there, it began to spread faster than anyone could understand. What began with only a few cases soon turned into outbreaks out of control. The symptoms appeared quickly and violently: high fever, intense pain, chills, a weakness that seemed to drain the life from the body, and then the swellings appeared beneath the skin. Dark, painful. They showed up in the armpits, in the neck, in the groin. They were the buboes, visible signs that the infection had taken over the body. In many cases, death came within days, sometimes within hours. Fear was everywhere, and when fear takes over, people begin to look for someone to blame. All it takes is a suspicion, a wrong look, a word out of place, and everything can change. Elias walked through the square and felt the weight of silence around him. Conversation stopped when he passed. Long stares, low whispers. Elias realized that it was no longer safe to stay. In many cities, strangers were no longer welcome. Travelers, merchants, foreigners, anyone who was not from that place was seen with suspicion. Some believed the plague was a punishment from God, a punishment for the sins of mankind. Fear quickly turned into guilt, and guilt turned into suffering. Groups of flagellants moved from town to town. They whipped themselves in public, beating their own backs until they bled. They believed pain could calm the wrath of God. They believed suffering could save the world. The nuns prayed for mercy, asking for the plague to go away. But the crowd wanted answers, and when answers did not come, someone had to pay. In those days, it did not take much. A different face, a strange accent, a way of speaking that did not belong to that place. That was enough, and suddenly, all eyes turned to you. Elias realized that he was no longer just a traveler. That night, he gathered what he could carry and left the town in silence before fear decided for him. And in times of fear, distrust spreads quickly. Rumors traveled along the roads. Stories crossed entire cities. What began as suspicion turned into panic. Fear left the squares and took the streets. It took the roads. It took whole cities. And that was how fear spread through many cities. People began to flee. Some left everything behind, while others tried to hide. But with time, the cities began to realize that they could not stop the disease. They started to close their gates. Ships were forced to wait outside. Travelers were not allowed to enter, and goods were often burned. And that was how a word appeared, a word we still use today. The word was quarantine. 40 days, enough time to know if someone was sick. It was not modern science yet, but it was no longer only faith. It was observation. It was trial and error. It was the beginning of a new kind of knowledge. And as the centuries passed, knowledge advanced. By the end of the 19th century, scientists finally discovered the real enemy, a bacterium, Yersinia pestis, carried by fleas that lived on rats, the same animal that traveled on ships, on carts, through markets, through crowded cities. What once seemed like divine punishment was a disease, and for the first time, humanity could understand how to fight it. Today, the plague still exists, but it no longer dominates the world. Antibiotics can cure it, hospitals can treat it, Control measures can stop it from spreading. The difference is not the bacteria, the difference is knowledge. The Black Death showed something that humanity should never forget. We are fragile. Civilizations seem eternal until the day they are not. But we are also able to learn, to change, to rebuild. The medieval world did not end at once. It was transformed by fear, by loss, by survival. And from that tragedy, a different world was born. The story of the Black Death is not only about death. It is about survival, about fear, about faith, about doubt, and about what happens when humanity is forced to face its own limits, because history shows the same truth again and again. It is not only about death. No era lasts forever. No world is as solid as it seems. And sometimes it takes a tragedy to remind us that every civilization has its limits. And while the world was changing, Elias kept walking, because the plague was not the end. It was only the beginning of a world. And his journey